if you're not interested or trying to jump into journaling right away, just noticing what is doing what, when, and how long it's lasting is a great start. Um, I know for me, like journaling about my cannabis use kind of feels like uh, the opposite of pleading the fifth. Like I'm just writing down a bunch of incriminatory shit and waiting for somebody to come and find it. So it's like, this guy fucking smokes. Like, look at the fucking, we're gonna have to watch him or whatever. Where do you get your shit? But again, now that certain states were allowed to engage in this legal market, which is really amazing, um, when you stop and think about it, what we have access to. I'm looking forward to, the next 5 years, 10 years, what this is going to look like, and being able to really engage with my VA primary care team, my physicians that are working with me to try to keep me healthy, right? Living a productive life. This is a key component. And unfortunately, in the system that we're in, it's hit or miss, whether or not you're going to have a good relationship with your nurses, your doctors, et cetera. Whether or not they even want to engage in the conversation, or they just shut you down. But hopefully with some type of federal action, it will embolden people who are in these positions to ask more questions about what it's doing. And then we'll be able to provide them with some type of documentation to give them a start. But if it goes federal, it looks like the VA and a whole bunch of people in medical school and all that are going to have to get re-educated on this little plant that they've been neglecting for a long time. That's my 2 cents.
And valuable 2 cents it is. Thank you very much, Council Member. Council Member Kowalski, to add to the discussion.
Yeah, I guess to pick up on my story a little bit more and kind of give my little shameless plug here, because I'm going to do it, is once I got through my doctors and started understanding my doctors, I was very fortunate to end up with a primary care doctor who really understood me and understood the system enough to not lie to me or drag me through the mud, sort in a sense. And something she told me stuck with me, and this was back in 2012, is that she told me that nobody in the VA, this was the VA I was going to anyway, knew how to treat PTSD effectively. And it was up to me to do my own research to understand my own condition and to guide my healthcare. And through those words, it brought up 2 interesting things. One, that I had the capability of controlling my healthcare, and 2, that doctors didn't really understand what they were doing or what they were really dealing with, and were kind of limited in the means of which they were able to deal with it. And this goes into the fact, specifically for PTSD, there are only 2 drugs that are FDA approved to treat such a condition, both of which have suicide warning labels. And suicide is one of the largest pandemics that we see amongst our veteran community. So that led me to understand that there's a tie-in effect potentially here. And so I worked with my primary care doctor and established my own mental health care plan that involved my cannabis use. And it was through this that it helped me fine-tune my journaling. It helped me fine-tune what I was seeking and understanding my body a lot more. And it also helped me understanding how cannabis could be utilized in conjunction with some form of mental health treatment. I've been through the gambit of mental health treatments, from prolonged exposure therapy to CBT. I've been through various types of other counseling. Um, and I found that if combining all of those tools that were taught to me in all of these therapies, some of which were made my symptoms worse, some made my symptoms better. I was able to combine a lot of these things I had learned with my cannabis use and really fine tune it for myself. And this is what allowed me to really break out of my shell, really get involved, and help me find my purpose again. And, giving back to my community through what I have learned, in hopes that one day it could change the system or change the mind of somebody within the system that would be very beneficial for another veteran or another individual out there that really needed it. And so I created my own nonprofit in 2016. And since then, it's been my ultimate goal to provide a journaling system for patients, to where they really can start understanding and fine tuning and simplifying the process of tracking to help benefit not only themselves, but also help benefit the medical community through that education and that data, in hopes that the medical community could then start understanding more about the plant, more about the individuals utilizing the plant. And so just recently, after about 6 years of trying, we finally were able to partner up with a company who has created a journaling app. That app company is Tetragram. There's my shameless plug. And Tetragram has partnered through V.A.C and is helping us work within their application to help streamline this data and help get data directly from the source, input it into their systems, so that way there's a lot less guessing and a lot less inputting for the patient, and so that the patient could then focus on the experience and focus on the medicinal properties of the plant. So with that, I'll let the next council member talk.
Councilmember Krawitz, on to you, sir.
Thank you, man. Yeah, man. I get a couple of things that jump to my mind about dosage, but before I talk about that, I want to kind of pick up on what Robert was just talking about. Just imagine how powerful it would be. We're suffering from a moment where I don't know how to put this. It comes to my head in so many different formats. We've been using an ancient herb, and we've been using it along the given information that we've collected from our culture, which includes new information and ancient information kind of mixed in a cultural format. And we've been using the cannabis medicine as a traditional medicine. In our world here in the West, it would be considered complementary medicine, because we're basing it on information that we drew from India and Africa and others. There it would be the traditional medicine, and we're adopting it, becomes our complementary medicine. That's how I understand it. And we have a situation where, especially with our government, where the law is lying. I mean, crazy situation. We actually have a law that lies, but our federal law every single day lies to the American people, lies to the world, and it violates the U.S. Constitution every single day, because our U.S. federal law says that cannabis has no medical value. Written right in the law. The law says cannabis has no medical value. And to get out of that box has been difficult. We've had, a couple of different roundtables where we've talked about how hard it's been to do science and research, how it's nearly impossible to get cannabis products into the pharmacy shelves, et cetera. But for us as patients, it's particularly problematic because our experiences are being dismissed. For many, many years, our experiences were just dismissed as anecdotal information. Well, that's just anecdotes. That's just people's stories, their personal experiences. It's an anecdote. And what turns a bunch of anecdotes into research is journaling. At least it's one aspect or one thing that could do it, that can make that connection. And I'll just leave it at that. Could you imagine, just imagine for a moment, instead of tens of thousands of veterans across the country that we know of using cannabis and we know of benefiting from cannabis, imagine if they all had a journal and we could point to those journals and have scientists look through those journals. One of the best documents that we have, or I should say one of the best sources of documentation that we have on the success of the New Mexico medical cannabis program's ability to treat patients for post-traumatic stress with cannabis was a research that was done by a Dr. Greer, who went through their medical files, who was given permission to look through medical files and do a medical file, a documentary review. And that's what you can do. You can have scientists and others look at these journals and draw from conclusions from it and make scientific determinations and statements and things from the anecdotes, if you have it documented, if you have that documentation. So I think that's a really important aspect of the big picture of each and every one of us having a journal and maybe taking advantage of a piece of software. Although I'm not selflessly plugging, I don't know anything about the software yet. But if Robert's working on it, I'd suggest it's a good starting point for us to look at. And then the thing that came to my mind earlier, it's kind of funny, it goes in a couple of different directions, but with cannabis dosing, the first thing that came to my mind was, as a disabled veteran and as someone using cannabis for pain and for other things, I use a lot of cannabis to look normal, to act normal, to be able to seem like I'm just basically okay. I'm using enough cannabis that might cripple a person if they used it recreationally for the first time. and I would have friends, come over and work at the house, help me with yard chores or whatever. And I came up with a ratio. And it was like my golden ratio, it's 6 puffs to 1. And as long as I kept that ratio or close to it, where every 6 puffs I took off the pipe, they got 1, or somewhere 3 to 6, somewhere about, depending on how strong the weed was. That was about the right ratio. And they could continue working, because otherwise they got couch locked. I was feeling great, ready to get back up and start doing stuff again, but they get couch locked. So that was the differential between recreational and non-recreational use at that moment, was like 3 to 6 to 1, somewhere in there. And then the other thing that I thought was really interesting was one of our doctors up in Maine, Dr. Dustin Sulak, did some experimentation I thought was fascinating. He took patients that were using a massive dose of cannabis, up to and even above what you were talking about, George, and knocking it down by taking a break from cannabis completely for a short period of time. Cannabis isn't like a lot of these drugs that build up a very strong, long-term, systemic tolerances and things like that. It seems like cannabis, it gets knocked down pretty quick when you stop the use of cannabis. It leaves your system in that regard. You might fail a drug test 6 weeks later, but a couple of days later, it seems like you're ready for a lower dose and to try it again at a different starting point. And what he was doing was using almost microscopic doses of cannabis and having them journal the effects. And darn if they weren't getting, in some cases, as good or better effects from a smaller dose. Certainly would save money, if nothing else, but I think it's just novel that a very, very tiny dose would actually be able to do something that a large dose would do. But it makes sense. If you look at the curve of the response curve, there's different high points and low points, evidently, amongst those response curves. And you can actually keep increasing the dose and actually be going in the wrong direction to get the better response for your body.
So as you said, document. That's a very important thing, especially when it comes with cannabis. Any council members have any wrap-up thoughts here on documenting? Going around, we'll go right around again. George.
Yeah, so I would suggest that everybody use the technology that we have in front of us. Leafly is a fantastic app. When you get to the point where I'm at, and your journaling has pointed you to that profile, they have separate profiles, so you can find similar, like Etienne was talking about, when you find something that really helps, you aren't always going to be able to get that strain. But once you find that profile, you can go out and find a strain that will do the same thing, because you can find a strain that has a very similar cannabinoid and terpene profile, even though it may look and smell quite different. So, yeah, I would say use the technology we have at our disposal for sure. And I would really I think what Mike and what Michael touched on about every veteran having documentation is a huge would be a huge thing. And for me, the best documentation that I got for results was my medical records, because I shared fairly early on, as soon as it was medically legal in my state, I shared with my doctor. So my medical records show the improvement of when I admitted to my doctors that I was using it medicinally, and at the same time, because that was when I was coming off a number of pharmaceuticals. So that's where the journaling got me. I would encourage everybody to do it, certainly, and there are other, I believe there's journaling apps that you use, that you can use, but quite honestly, something like Leafly is very, very handy to look at all different strains in the world. But quite honestly, most of the apps is just going to organize your information for you, so you could actually probably do it in a way that you understand it just as well on a Google Docs, or the way I like to do it, on a handwritten piece of paper. So if you're a person who remembers things better if you write them down, that would be my one little tip for you. Is, for me, it always works better if I write it down by hand, to remember it later on, and use what we have at our disposal. But you don't have to it doesn't take anything but a pen and a piece of paper, and a little bit of effort to do this. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilmember Armstrong. Councilmember Prieta, final thoughts.
Oh, it's a brave new world. I don't really, I encourage people to listen to George and Michael and Etienne and Robert and everybody. It's good advice here. It's free. It's like, we're not charging anything. We're just trying to relay some helpful, useful information. And hopefully you're already doing it, and you can tell us some things that have worked out for you in your system as well. But we're just now starting this thing. Everybody's coming out of the closet, so to speak. And as we get all the states online and more people turned on to this is just going to be more and more of a needed conversation to have many more times in more places than just Facebook Live and YouTube. So thanks for another great roundtable.
Thank you, Rico. And going over to Councilmember Kowalski. Final thoughts, sir.
First off, disclaimer, me, myself, and I am not a doctor or a medical professional, and therefore you should not take my advice as such, but consult a physician or a doctor first. Also, there's more than one way to to skin a cat, right? So we've talked about multiple things. We've talked about multiple data points. But mostly, one big takeaway that you can take from this is be open and honest with your doctor. The cannabis plant is a very special substance. It does and can interact with other medications or surgeries or anesthesia or whatnot. So just be open, honest with your doctor about your usage. This is for your benefit, more or less. And also don't be afraid of it no more. With your help and with documentation, doctors will be better able to understand this product and be able to help more and more people.
I gotta say something real quick too. I'm not a doctor either. Yeah. But it's sound advice to journal and document your shit, fuckers. But you know who's not a doctor either? Kevin Sabet from Smart Approaches to Marijuana. He's not a doctor either, and he gives out all kinds of shitty advice. Well, at least we're giving you something good. It'll work for you too, I guarantee it. Journal, record it.
And the first official pot shot over the bow. All right, Council Member Crowitz, final thoughts.
And I have to second that emotion. I'm not a medical doctor or lawyer or anything, and no advice or anything I should say should ever be interpreted as such. But I do have to defend Kevin Sabet by saying that he does have a PhD. So he can legitimately use the title doctor, even though he's not a medical doctor.
Oh, blacks. Oh, letter of the law. He's not a medical doctor.
Yeah. So I alluded to earlier a problem that might be sitting in your medical file if you're a disabled veteran, you've been going to the VA hospitals. I think for particularly if you have had some sort of issue where you went to see a new doctor or went to the emergency room or something like that, and they seem to have an attitude with you that you couldn't understand, or if they've taken actions or prescribed you things that you didn't really understand, any kind of relationship issue where they seem to be dealing with a different vet than the one that you are presenting to them in yourself. These would all be, I think, particularly strong signs that there might be a problem. I would definitely recommend any vet to go and see what they've got in your medical file. It's just a good FYI to follow and track along with what the doctors are saying in your medical file. You can actually get into your medical files through military servers if you sign up for that, or you can go to the release of information office at the VA hospital and ask for them. If you go to the release of information or go online through the military servers and get access to your files, to my knowledge, there's absolutely no way that your medical team would ever know this. So it's not something that they would particularly be alerted to or in any way find offensive. And there may actually be even documentation relating that we were talking about in our behind the scenes conversation the other day. It's worth repeating that there's also an administrative file that you have at the VA that I don't believe is accessible online. You would have to go to the release of information, ask for a copy of that. But there may be ongoing diagnoses, notes in that you might want to read and track. And if there is a problem, of course, you go to your patient advocate at your VA hospital, you bring it to the attention of the chief of staff, you bring it to the attention of the director of the facility. You do not get in a fight with your doctor or your treatment team. I wouldn't even recommend bringing it to their attention. Just go right above their head. You know their boss and their boss is you. So that's the tact I would take. And I guess I'll leave it at that, but I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate y'all. And this is something that, gosh, it's been so important to us, but as we're pointing out, it could be even more important to the future. If we could develop a really good block of information that'll get us through this time period and help the medical science really understand what we're benefiting from right now, we could be shaping, hundreds of years of medical access to cannabis for millions of patients. So thanks for your help.
And thank you for your advice, council members. And needless to say, I've never claimed to be a doctor, not going to pretend to be one, all the above. We're just offering advice that we ourselves have used that have found have worked for us, as well as found that have worked for other patients. That's why I keep doing it, is because most importantly, it's to give people an understanding, because there is so much misinformation about cannabis. out there. So for you to do your own documentation and then, use your own words to help yourself is probably one of the best ways you can help yourself. So by documenting it and having access for you, your partner, as well as for your doctor, it's only going to benefit most of all you as well as your doctor. It gives them a different and a breadth of knowledge regarding cannabis, because sometimes we are the educator of our doctors as well. So, take it for what it's worth. We appreciate all of our council members and their discussions tonight. Council members Ricardo Prieta, George Armstrong, Michael Krawitz, Robert Kowalski, and myself, Etienne Fontaine. We thank you very much for joining us tonight for this discussion, and feel free to share your experiences on our Facebook page. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Stops.